How has the 2026 DHS and USCIS asylum eligibility changes specifically impacted Indian and South Asian applicants, and what common pitfalls should they avoid during credible fear interviews?
That's a really good question. 2026, 2025, kind of like in flux, right? We know that things keep kind of getting more difficult for individuals all over the spectrum of immigration. If we're talking about eligibility specific to India and South Asia, I would say that it's kind of the same as everybody else in the sense that these particular social groups are being looked at a little bit more and they're being pulled apart and they're not being accepted as much. And so you may still have situations where individuals, for example, women viewed as property or women who are trafficked in some way, that has become a little bit more difficult to prove. As far as specifics to the nationalities and the groups that you're in your question, there isn't anything that I am aware of that has come out specifically targeting those specific groups. The other part of your question is also very good as far as the credible fear interviews. And so I don't know if we have a minute to just kind of briefly talk about what a credible fear interview is, but basically what that is, it's kind of like a pre-interview, right? So let's say that you have been stopped by ICE or by immigration for whatever reason, and you indicate that you are afraid to go home. You're afraid to go back to your country. So what you are doing is you're saying, I am afraid. And so US law requires that an asylum officer give you what's called a credible fear screening. It's almost like a precursor to a full-on asylum application, an asylum interview, where they're just getting very broad information as to what your fear is and whether it is tied to one of the reasons that you can claim for asylum. And so those interviews can be very difficult. They're very quick. They can be difficult in the sense that they usually don't happen in person. They happen over the phone. An individual may or may not be detained. They may or may not have access to an interpreter they feel comfortable with. They may or may not understand the kind of like the legal system that they're stepping into, especially obviously being from a different country. It's a different legal system. And so my best advice for those credible fear interviews is if you have the opportunity to have an attorney with you, by all means, try to do that. You do have the right to request that your attorney be present. The attorney can help navigate you through that, make sure that if the officer isn't asking you the necessary questions to make sure that you get your story out there, the attorney can also ask you questions and provide that information. As far as pitfalls, one thing that I noted and have noticed is that people talk, right? So you might have somebody that says, I said XYZ at my credible fear interview, that worked. Oh, you should say XYZ because, that is something that might help you. And so my best piece of advice is to just be honest and clear about the reasons why you specifically are afraid. You do not want to be put in a position where you are not sure about what it is that you are claiming because you're afraid, but you don't know perhaps the specific name of the group you're afraid of, but then somebody else has used a different name. So you just want to make sure that if you don't know some information, you're very clear and you say, I don't know that information, and that you just speak from your personal perspective of what you are afraid of.